workshop meeting of the town commissioners of Rising Sun. Okay, this is Mr. Berkowitz, and Mr. Bonneberger. Okay, he's at the town hall right now.
There's still an executive meeting for the ethics committee.
Right, he's just leaving the town hall.
He'll be here tomorrow.
Okay, well, we can start. Okay. So we had the roll call. Now, the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Marion will lead us in a moment of silence.
All right, let us have a moment of silence in remembrance of those victims, first responders, and all those who lost their lives 11 years ago today on September 11th, 2001. Thank you.
Okay, do any of you have the minutes of August 28th for the town meeting or September 6th special meeting?
I make a motion that we accept the minutes of August the 14th as presented. We don't have the minutes for the 28th or the 6th yet.
Where are the 14th? I don't know the 14th either.
They were handed out at the last meeting and then emailed to us later. I don't have another copy other than the one that was emailed to me. Do you, Stephen?
Not with me, no.
Well, why don't we defer it? It's pretty hard to approve something you don't have. Any objection to that?
Mr. Berkowitz will be attending. He's a few minutes late.
Okay, the reporting on the executive session. Who's reporting on that? Oh, we have to defer that. Okay. Orders and resolutions and special presentations, and the first on the list is the Maple Heights Development. Final dedication and school bus pickup. Who's presenting that?
The letter indicated that Mr. Montgomery would be.
Well, Mr. Montgomery's not here. So, I'm doing very well. Ordinance 2012-5, rules of ethics. Do we have that?
I'll do that.
Okay, great.
Let me give you some background on this matter. We have the members of the Ethics Board are here. They're going to talk a little bit. Mr. Bonneberger is bringing the copy of the resolution, the ordinance with him. We just finished an executive session to hammer out the last details. So here is the story. Back in 2010, the Maryland General Assembly passed a law that said all municipal governments, that is, local governments of counties or towns, have to have the same identical ethics ordinance as it relates to conflicts of interest and financial disclosures. Prior to that time, since the 1970s, the towns had to have ethics laws if they were required to do it, but they could change the provisions of what they had to require, who had to report, what they had to report, and those things. And the state decided in 2010 and years prior that that wasn't going to be good enough, that all elected officials across the state of Maryland, whether they work for the state, the county, or the local level, must comply to the same ethics provisions as related to conflicts of interest and financial disclosures. So in 2010, that law passed the General Assembly, and towns were given basically 2 years or 10 months to, a year and 10 months to comply.
Can you hear David? Can you hear?
Okay, so after that time, that would have been October of last year. The State Ethics Commission is the one who does ethics laws for state officials, so the senators, the governors, the legislators, those people. They promulgated draft guidelines of what they would accept as uniform. And then all the municipalities had to comply. And that process has taken about a year, almost 18 months, for all the municipalities to comply. Because it's not as simple as just grabbing that paper and copying. You have to see how it's going to apply to your local towns. So, Rising Sun has an ethics commission. It doesn't meet very often, but in the last 18 months, it's met and tried to make sure it understood what needed to happen, and as things got developed by the state, digested them, and came up with a recommendation that you're going to get handed out tonight for a Town of Rising Sun ethics ordinance. The pertinent parts of that are, it is going to replace the ethics ordinance that is on the books. So it's really irrelevant what is on the books. It's going to take the good things that were in the prior ethics ordinance, add what is required by the state, and then even improve upon that more, okay? And the ethics board can tell you the rationale for doing that. The ordinance itself is 27 pages long, so I'm not going to read it. If you want to read it into the record when Calvin gets here, you can have at that. It's something that you're going to have to review, and I want to give you some of the technical highlights and then the procedural highlights, and then I'm going to turn it over to the Ethics Commission. The technical highlights are, obviously, it's going to create the Ethics Commission. Yes, I know we already said that the town has one, but you're changing the entire ordinance, so it will talk about the terms of the Ethics Commission, who's on it, the makeup, and things like that. It will have a conflict of interest section that applies to everyone that works for Rising Sun. Elected official, appointed official, employee. Same across the board. And the conflict of interest section got a lot of issues in it, but it basically talks about what is a conflict of interest for all those people. The next section is a financial disclosure section. This is required by the state. Our Ethics Commission, Rising Sun, will create a form that all elected officials and appointed officials will have to fill out on a yearly basis. And that form will show what holdings you have in a general sense, real estate, stocks. It's basically going to be the same. Talk to any elected official in the state, they're going to fill out the same issue. That'll be filed every year. It's open to the public can look at it, and it's an attempt to make sure that there's more clarity and more crystal clear vision into the town's activity. There'll also be some other provisions, the provisions of when you're bad and you don't follow the ethics ordinance or you don't file the things, what happens there. And then the last section, which is under the ethics ordinance but is not required by the state, but your ethics commissioners thought it was important, is it's something to deal with campaign finance. It'll talk about how you deal with campaigns and raising money and reporting money that goes on in the scope of getting elected or influencing the vote here in Rising Sun. That's the technical issue. The procedural issue. This ordinance gets introduced by you tonight. It gets an ordinance number and it sits because you can't pass it until the State Ethics Commission approves it. So after tonight, I will take that ordinance and I will take it to the State Ethics Commission. It'll go to one of their normal monthly meetings whenever they can get it on their agenda. Their staff will review it, and they'll say whether or not it meets the terms, the minimum terms of state law. We can exceed state law, which ours would, but the minimum terms of state law. Once they give that blessing to us, they'll write us a letter. I'll come back to you in a meeting saying, your ethics ordinance is blessed. If there are any changes, your ethics commission will make the changes, and then it'll be in front of you for a vote. And that's basically it. The timetable to accomplish this is probably sometime in the next 4 weeks. You want to get this done so that we can develop the form, the reporting form that is necessary so that you can have the necessary input of the public and people who have to fill them out, because you'll have to start filling them out after December 31st of this year. So it's a timely type of thing. With that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Fox, the chairman of the Rising Sun Ethics Commission, and you can introduce your committee. I think all three of you are here.
I didn't see Reverend James here.
Oh, okay.
My name's Dave Fox. I'm the chairperson for the Ethics Board. This is Charles Slayball. Reverend Jim Jones is the third member. We are a three-commission board, three-person board. We were appointed by Judy Cox, former Mayor Judy Cox, in 2010. We've been serving for 18 months or so. We are appointed for 3 years. This new ordinance, if approved, will actually require us to mix up how we're going to do that. Right now, we are all in the same term, but we would be reappointed, or new persons would come onto the board in staggered terms. So this ordinance would address that as well. But we've been working on this probably most intensively in the last several weeks with a handful of meetings, a lot of emails, a lot of reviews and drafts going back and forth over the last several weeks. We're really proud of what we've developed. We believe that we've not only met the state guidelines, but we have significantly exceeded the guidelines. We are very proud of what this document would do for the town, eliminate a lot of holes that exist in the current ethics ordinance, not only because of the state guidelines being tighter, but just problems that could arise going forward. You have anything you wish to add?
Nothing in particular, except I would questions. In the event that anybody has any general questions, please understand we can't answer specific questions at this point about any particular concerns you might have. But if you have any general questions about what the ethics committee is working on, please let us, or go ahead and ask. And that certainly applies to you all too.
In general, what we can decide to put in a campaign finance.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, Rising Sun didn't have anything in there, and the state guidelines do not apply to Rising Sun, right, if I remember correctly. So essentially, there was nothing in the ordinance to provide how much could be contributed, how much could be expended, and this will now have something on the books to kind of control it.
And I would say too, that it's good business practice. It's good political practice to put something in there like that.
It's oversight.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Yes.
Do I understand that it's mayor's duty and one of the other members of the other board?
Now, the Board of Commissioners.
One is commissioner.
Yes.
Under the current ordinance, the mayor did. Under the one that we are suggesting or recommending be approved, it would then be the town commissioners.
I see. Thank you.
Because to point out where we are today is we are still under the existing ordinance, which does not meet the state guidelines. So changes have to be made. Any other questions?
What is the deadline?
I think was it October?
What was the question?
What are the deadlines?
What are the deadlines?
The deadline for submission to the State Ethics Commission was September 30th, 2011. So,
What
once
is
this
the deadline for implementation for us?
implementation, since we've been in contact with them, they would like it done as soon as possible. They want this law effective so that January 1, 2013, you would have to file for all your activity of 2012. So did that answer your question? We have to have it done.
I have the second part. of that
Okay.
question. Did the ethics board make any recommendation as to the deadline?
We'll follow the state guidelines.
I'll say on that.
That's it.
Yes, sir.
Is this available to the public scrutiny now?
We have, it looks like our draft just came in. I assume that can be made available to anybody.
Right, after this meeting, it's introduced, and I'm sure it'll be on the website, and however the town traditionally treats those things. And that leads me to a question is, Val, if I could have one. Okay, that's how thick it is. I know you traditionally read these into the minutes. Who wants to do that? I mean, I'd be happy to do it if you feel it's necessary.
Can you give a summary of it? I think if they're really interested in it, they should go on the website and do that.
Well,
Does it need to be read into the record formally?
Your tradition is you read these things into the record. It is nowhere, I've never found in your town code where you have to do that, but you all seem to like to do that. So if you want to, you can read it in. As far as the summary, Mayor, I gave the kind of the summary of what was supposed to happen. When you read this, the first 6 pages will tell you what is existing, and that's all going to go away. So it's page 7 and on where the new stuff really is. So I leave it to your board, whether you want to read it in, and whether you have any more questions for the ethics board. They really have worked hard. This has been a difficult subject because they're trying to meet the needs of the community and the needs of the state law at the same time.
Any other questions we presented to the commission?
description number, so if you want to have it read in, which is what you normally do, then that's what you should do.
Well, do we really need to read all the boilerplate? Why don't we just read the meat of what it's about? I mean,
I'll do whatever you all would like me to do,
well, that's what I'd like to do.
okay? Would you like me to do it, or would you want one of your colleagues to do it?
Whoever wants to do it.
Have we had ordinances in the past that are lengthy like this, we've read into the record, that's what we've done?
Unbelievably, yes. Yes, you have done. When you did your last bond borrowing, you read that into the record.
Well, yeah, we've made lots of changes.
Right.
And, you know, yes, good, Chuck.
Perhaps it would be appropriate to let the state look at it first, which at the same time will allow you to take a look at it. And then perhaps we can discuss the meat of it as you refer to it. As opposed to getting into that, you know, one person's meat is another person's vegetable, so.
And it'll also give the audience a chance to look at it if they're interested in it.
So I could make a motion that we submit it to the state before reading it into the minutes.
Okay?
Okay, we have a motion,
We, what, submit what to state?
This has to go to the state for approval before we actually vote on
So,
it. The ordinance.
Ordinance.
let me clarify this,
Ordinance,
so
I'm
you know
sorry,
what we're doing.
ordinance,
2012.
2012-5.
This goes to the state, as the commissioner indicated. When the state puts their blessing on this, any changes have to go back to the state. Okay? So what we really want is for you all to be cognizant of what it says, because when the state approval comes back, you will be voting on to adopt it. And so, and you know we're under a time crisis to do it. So if the approval came back within the next 2 weeks, at the next meeting, you'd be asked to vote on this. And I know how sensitive that is for everyone.
Okay, but we really want it in effect by the end of the year, is that correct? So if we all went home and read it, because we haven't read it yet,
Right.
and it was available to the townspeople to read on the internet, and I withdraw my motion here, because I'm talking. If we have it to read
Can you hear in the
before
back?
the next meeting, and we've read it by the next meeting, at that point, we can make a motion to send it to the state, is that correct?
They're expecting it after tonight's meeting because they're expecting it to be introduced tonight. Because you can introduce it, I mean, I guess we're trying to be lazy and not read this, is that what this comes down to? I
It
don't
takes a
mind.
lot of time. And
Right, and I don't mind speed reading through it if that's what it takes to have this introduced. But this needs to be introduced because all it is becoming an official ordinance at that point. So Mayor, you just want me to highlight what it says?
Right.
All right. This will be the introduction of ordinance number 2012-5. It's an ordinance of the town of Rising Sun that deals with the administration and government chapter that deals with public ethics laws and creates rules and regulations regarding campaign finance and repeals other ordinances or parts in conflict therewith. There's several boilerplate languages. In section 1 is the existing chapter 2 of the administration and government article, which deals with the ethics policy. I'm skipping 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of section 1 because they are the existing law. If you're interested in what the existing law is, go on the website and look. It's right there right now. Section 2 talks about this ordinance will modify the article by deleting the existing article and including and replacing it with the following. And what I will do is I will just highlight each section as we go through. If there's anybody who wants me to read something specific, that's fine. Article 6, ethics provision, section 2601, applicability. The provision of this article applies to all officials, employees, and appointees to boards, commissioners, and committees of the town, unless otherwise specified. Section 2602 deals with the ethics commission. The membership of it shall be made of 3 members and have staggered terms. B talks about the fact that there's going to be a chairman. C talks about the town attorney as the attorney for the Ethics Commission. And D gives the responsibilities of the Ethics Commission, which deals with the enforcement of this article, collecting information, reviewing the information that's provided, granting exceptions, conducting investigations and hearings, and establishing regulations, establishing forms, and dealing with the State Ethics Commission on or before October 1st of each year to tell them the status of your ethics law. E of that section talks about the removal of the Ethics Commission members. An Ethics Commission member can be removed for neglect of duty, misconduct, a disability, or a violation of the ethics article. Section 2603 deals with conflicts of interest. It states that all town elected officials, appointed town officials, to boards and commissions, employees and commissioners are subject to the conflict of interest. It deals with prohibited, participation is prohibited, and it gives a laundry list of things where you cannot participate. That basically means if you have an interest in a business entity that's doing business with the town, you cannot participate on the town's behalf. And there's a whole page of different variations of that. It talks about the disqualifications. Then it talks about employment and financial interest. If you have an employment with somebody who is doing business with the town or is in conflict with the town, you cannot make decisions for the town on that behalf. If you have a financial interest in something that the town is affecting, and that means holding stock in a company or owning a piece of a company that does business with the town, you have to disclose that and you cannot participate in the decision. After you're employed by the town, you are limited from employment representing anyone in front of the town for a period of 1 year. So you can't be involved on this side of the table and then go immediately to that side of the table and represent somebody for money at that point. You can't use your office, the prestige of your office, to gain any private or any personal gain for yourself or others. You can't solicit gifts. You can't get gifts. And basically, it has a laundry list of what gifts are and what you can do. Obviously, there are exceptions. You can get gifts for family things, birthdays, and things like that. But we're talking about town-related items. And so there's exceptions to that. You can't disclose confidential information. If you have confidential information that particularly relates to the town and town business, you can't disclose that, or that would be an ethics violation. And it talks about that. You can't solicit business from anybody. For example, you couldn't say that if you do this, I will vote for that. If you give me a job, you can't solicit business. And you can't represent to any governmental entity or anyone else that your position when you talk is the official town position, unless, of course, it is the official town position as voted on by the mayor and commissioners. And you can't participate in procurement, and individuals who actually participate in procurement, what that means is if you say, I want someone to fashion a bid for a park, that person in the third party can't come in, help fashion the bid, and then go ahead and bid on it themselves. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Section 2-604 is the other one required by the state. It deals with financial disclosures, and I'll read the people that it applies to. I think that's pretty important for everybody to understand. A financial disclosure has to be made by the following people: all the elected people, all the appointed people, and the following employees: the town administrator, the members of the planning commission, the members of the board of zoning board, the parks and recreation board, the ethics commission, the election board, the town clerk, the town treasurer, the utility billing secretaries, the police citation and billing clerk, the director of public works, the code enforcement officer, and the chief of police, and town appointed members to the historic commission. Those people must file a financial disclosure. The next section talks about the deadline. It has to be filed by January 31st, and it discloses the transactions for the prior year. Candidates also have to fill this out. Before you can run for office, the state law now says that you must fill out the same forms. If you don't fill out the forms, you can't run for office. All of this is in the public record, so anybody who wants to see any of these things, once they're filed, shows up to town hall and does that, and there's a section of that. The next section talks about the contents. It gives lots of specific definitions, but I'm just going to highlight the top. You can read it for yourself. You have to give your interest in real property, that's real estate. You have to give your interest in corporations and partnerships. Any interest in business entities doing business with the town. Any gifts that you receive. Any employment interests or entities doing business with the town. Any indebtedness to anybody who's doing business with the town. Any family members employed by the town. All your sources of earned income. Civic organizations and similar entities which you hold in office. That would be something like a homeowners association, the Lions Club, the fire department. If you hold an office in one of those organizations, you have to disclose that. And any additional information you feel like you need to have. There's a section that talks about what the definition of an interest is, and it's kind of complicated, but you can imagine owning one share of AT&T stock does not make you have an interest in AT&T. You have to own a certain percentage of the company, and it talks about that. It also talks about whether your spouse or family will be included in that interest, so you can't hide things from one to the other. Section 2605 deals with exemptions and modifications. It basically says that the Ethics Commission can grant exemptions and modifications to this to everyone that I listed except for the elected officials. The state law will not let you get any exemptions or modifications. You must follow the letter of the law. But other people can get exemptions if it would include an unreasonable invasion of privacy, reduce the ability to have people for public service, or it doesn't really meet the purposes of what we're trying to accomplish. Section 2606 talks about complaints, investigations, and hearings. That's pretty straightforward. If somebody thinks somebody violated something, you'd make a complaint to the Ethics Commission, they do an investigation, and they have a hearing, and they deal with it. And so the next few pages talk about that. 2607 deals with enforcement, basically how these articles are enforced. If people fail to file these on time, there are penalties. There are monetary penalties, there's court penalties, there's things that, bad things happen when you do bad things. That's what this section is. Section 2608 talks about appeals and reconsideration. If somebody feels that they have been wronged by a decision of the Ethics Commission, it talks to you about how you can make that right. And that's the end of Section 2, ethics. Section 3 talks about moving the numbering of the code around. Irrelevant at this point. And Section 4 talks about the new numbering. Section 4 then institutes Article 7, which is campaign contributions and expenditures. 701 basically says that if a candidate runs for office, they have to file a report, just like a state candidate would, that talks about their campaign finances, what they received, and what they spent. It talks about the timing of when you have to do that, and the election cycle, and things all related to that. Then it talks about if there's any political committees. You usually don't have that, but if there's a political committee to get people or slates elected, they have to follow the same rules, but those rules are laid out here as well. It talks about what happens if you fail to file. It talks about who gets the reports and the penalty for failure to file. And if you're a candidate, you don't get to hold office. It talks about restrictions on campaign contributions. You can see that there's a limit in there, but basically it's $100. Somebody can't give more than $100, and you can't take more than $100 from one person. And it talks about how that $100 is decided, whether it's cash, in kind, whether it's a check, what cash means. I'm going over this 1,000 miles an hour. It's in there. It talks about loans to candidates, what the maximum amount of a loan that you can get, what a candidate can consider a loan, what is not a loan, and talking about running for office. We're not talking about loans for houses and things. We're talking about prohibited uses of campaign contributions. You can't use them for illegal things like paying fines for not complying. It talks about advertising restrictions when you run, how you have to put your little advertisement of like who paid for this if it's a campaign thing. You've seen that in all the other ones, especially this time of year. Talks about that any corporation, business, or other legal entity can make a contribution. Okay, so when we say person, we really mean company, we mean business, but the limits apply. And then it talks about that at the end, you're not going to run for office anymore, and you still have money in your war chest. What can you do with it? And it talks that you return it, you give it to a charity, the Board of Education, or an institution of higher learning. You just can't keep it. And then it talks about the violations, that if you violate this section, there's fines and penalties. It can be considered a misdemeanor and take it to court. More bad stuff. The rest of the ordinance is all the boilerplate. I don't think it's necessary to read any of that. And that is the 5 or 10 minute version of the 27 pages. Any questions?
Yes, just curious. Under section, on page 13, section 2-604, financial disclosure.
Yes.
I will ask the town attorney why the town attorney is not included on that list.
I'm not an employee. Once you make me a W-2 employee and give me all your great benefits, I'd be right there.
Okay, that makes sense. Just curious.
Any other questions? If not, we'll go to ordinance 2.
Do we have to make a motion to accept it as presented?
That would be helpful, so I can write the Ethics Commission and stuff.
I make a motion that we accept the ordinance number 2012-5 as presented to us.
Motion to approve ordinance 2012-5. Is there a second?
Yes, that's second.
We've had the discussion. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. So it's 3-0. Ordinance 2012-6, and the title of that is addressing the board time limits in the forum, and there are copies of that on the table over there. In this case, it's being introduced tonight. It will be acted on at the next meeting. And it will be advertised on the website and in the paper. So, who's the sponsor of the board?
I am the sponsor, Mr. Mayor. So, I'd like to just talk briefly about it and then read it into the record. 2012-06 is a proposal to change the ordinance regarding
A little louder if
an ordinance regarding public comment at town meetings.
you can. And you here in the back?
One of the reasons I wanted to introduce this was last year, when I was a new commissioner, we were faced with telling the folks who do not live in town, but own property in town, that they could not vote. And there were very good reasons why we had to do that, but one of the things that this does is this makes it clear that those people are important to the town of Rising Sun. What we're doing is we're saying that essentially, and I'll read this in the record, but essentially to address the board during public comment, you would need to be a resident of the town, you would need to be a property owner, or a representative of an organization incorporated in town. It also changes the time limits from a maximum of 10 minutes, which it currently is, to 3 minutes if you're an individual, or 5 if you're an organization. And what I did, so you know some of the background that I did, I called the surrounding municipalities, Everglades, Perryville, Northeast, Elkton, and I also contacted the county council and find out what standards they use, and those are typically 3 or 5 minutes. So that's what I went with. I'm going to read this into the record now. The opening is a boilerplate, you know, is here. So I'll move right to section 1. Chapter 2 of this code contains Article 1 titled Board Organization and Procedure, which contains Section 2-109 titled Addressing the Board, which currently reads as Section 2-109 Addressing the Board. Any person desiring to address the board shall first secure the permission of the presiding officer to do so, provided, however, that under the following headings of business, unless the presiding officer rules otherwise, a qualified person may address the board without securing such prior permission. 1. Written communication. Interested parties or their authorized representatives may address the board by written communication in regard to matters then under discussion. 2. Oral communication. Taxpayers or residents of the town or their authorized legal representatives may address the board by oral communication on any matter concerning the town, provided, however, that preference shall be given to those persons who may have notified the clerk in advance of their desire to speak, in order that the same may appear on this agenda of the board. This section shall be modified as follows. A, the opening paragraph should be modified by deleting all the text and replacing it to read as follows. Any person desiring to address the board may do so as follows. B, section 1 of this section titled Written Communication shall be modified by keeping the title of the subsection, but deleting the corresponding text and replacing it to read as follows. 1, interested parties or their authorized representatives may address the board by written communication sent to the mayor and commissioners no less than 2 business days before the scheduled meeting to include the subject matter that they would like to address. Unless the request to present such subject matter before the board is rejected by the board of commissioners, the matter will be placed on the meeting agenda with the time allotted for discussion to be determined by the board of commissioners. C, subsection 2 of this section titled Oral Communication shall be modified by changing the title of the subsection and deleting the corresponding text and replacing it to read as follows. 2, oral communication and public comments. Residents and property owners of the town of Rising Sun and representatives of organizations incorporated in the town of Rising Sun may address the board by oral communication on any given matter concerning the town during the public comment period, provided that they list their name, address, and/or entity they represent on the meeting sign-in sheet However, no person shall be allowed to address the board until the appropriate time set forth in the agenda, and then after recognition by the presiding officer of the board. Section 2. Section 2 of this code contains Article 1 titled Board Organization and Procedure, which contains Section 2-10110, titled Addressing the Board After Motion Made, which currently reads as Section 2-110, Addressing the Board After Motion Made. After a motion is made by the board, no person shall address the board without first securing the permission of the presiding officer to do so. This section shall be modified by keeping the title but deleting the corresponding text and replacing it to read as follows. Any person or entity as described in Section 2-109, subsection 2 above, may address any issue or action taken by the board under public comment. Section 3. Section 2 of this code contains Article 1 titled Board Organization and Procedure, which contains Section 2-111, titled Manner of Addressing Board Time Limit, which currently reads as Section 2-111. Each person addressing the board shall step up to the board table, shall give his name and address in an audible tone of voice for the record, and unless further time is granted by the board, shall limit his address to 10 minutes. All remarks shall be addressed to the board as a body and to any member thereof. No person other than the board and the person having the floor shall be permitted to enter into any discussion, either directly or through a member of the board, without the permission of the presiding officer. No question shall be asked by a board member except to the presiding officer. The foregoing shall not apply to members of the board or the mayor. This section shall be modified by keeping the title but deleting the corresponding text at the end of the first sentence after the words "unless further time is granted by the board," and replace it to read as follows. Their comments shall limit their comments to 3 minutes if an individual, or 5 minutes if they are the designated representative of an organization incorporated in the town of Providence. After this entry, B, after this entry, starting with the words "all remarks will be addressed to the board as a body," will be modified by adding the word "not" in this sentence. By adding the word "not" within the sentence so that it reads, "all remarks shall be addressed to the board as a body and not to any member thereof." C, all members of the remaining text, starting with the words "no person shall remain unchanged," the rest of the paragraph. Section 4. Chapter 2 of this code contains Article 1, titled Board Organization and Procedure, which contains Section 2-113, titled Decorum, which currently reads as Section 2-113. 1. By commissioners. While the Board of Commissioners is in session, order and decorum must be preserved, and the commissioner shall neither, by conversation or otherwise, delay or interrupt the proceedings, or disturb any other commissioner while speaking, or refuse to obey the orders of the commission or its presiding officer, except as otherwise provided herein. 2. By persons. Any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or who shall become boisterous while addressing the commissioners, shall be forthwith by the presiding officer barred from further audience before the commission, unless permission to continue be granted by a majority vote of the commission. 3. Enforcement. The chief of police, or such member, or members of the police department as the mayor may designate, shall be sergeant-at-arms at all meetings. He or they shall carry out all orders and instructions given by the presiding officer for the purpose of maintaining order and decorum at all meetings. Upon instruction of the presiding officer, it shall be the duty of the sergeant-at-arms to place any person who violates order and decorum of the meeting under arrest and cause him to be prosecuted under provisions of this code. The complaint to be signed by the presiding officer. This section can be modified as follows. A, subsection 1 of this section shall be modified by changing the title to read "by mayor and commissioners," and adding the text "neither the mayor nor" after the words "must be preserved and," but before the words "a commissioner shall." In addition, the word "neither," which appears before the comma, followed by the word "by conversation," shall be deleted. All the remaining language in the subsection remains unchanged. B, subsection 2 and 3 will be deleted in their entirety and replaced with the following subsections. 2, during public meetings of the mayor and commissioners, all persons shall preserve order and decorum. Any person making personal attacks, impertinent, slander, offensive, or threatening remarks, or becoming boisterous shall be barred from further attendance at the meeting by the presiding officer unless permission for continued attendance is granted by a majority of the vote of commissioners. 3, meetings of the mayor and commissioners shall be conducted in a courteous manner. 4, the chief of the Washington Police Department, or such member designated by the chief or members of the police department, shall serve as sergeant-at-arms at the meeting. Upon the direction of the presiding officer, upon motion of the majority of the board of commissioners, the sergeant-at-arms shall remove such person from the meetings who violate these rules and regulations unless such person's continued attendance is permitted by the majority vote of the town commission. Section 5, Chapter 2 of this code contains Article 1, titled Board Organization and Procedure, which contains Section 2-114, titled Persons Authorized to be seated at the board table, which currently reads as, no persons except town officers or their representatives shall be permitted to be seated at the board table unless granted permission to do so by the presiding officer. This section shall be modified by deleting the words or their representative at the beginning of the sentence, and also deleting the words presiding officer at the end of the sentence, and replacing them with the word board of commissioners. Section 6, all ordinances or parts thereof inconsistent herewith are repealed, rescinded, canceled, and annulled. And the rest is the boilerplate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion.
Okay, motion has been made.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, we're not, that's next time. All right. Discussion.
I have a comment.
Any discussions on there?
Well, it's a workshop. I think we're going to talk about it tonight.
Yes, I would like to see, under C, Section 1C, subsection 2, oral communications. I think we need to add, and business owners, we have the word incorporated there, and that means that within the town.
What page you on?
I'm on page 2.
Okay.
Because it's confusing, because not all business owners are incorporated, and some would read that and say, oh, do I have to be incorporated to come and do it? What we're really saying is incorporated in the town as belonging in the town, but I think we need to specify business owners within the town as well.
I see your point. I thought about that, and I was trying to remember what I was thinking, why I didn't think of it at the time. Is Calvin here now? Do you recall, did we talk about that? Because I actually brought that up with you, and I'm trying to remember what my thinking was. It's been a long week. I apologize for.
Well, the original language did talk about business.
I know, I remember that, and we talked about it, and I had a concern about that, and I can't articulate right now
Well,
what that was.
if I recall correctly, you had opinion that businesses that are incorporated would be able to speak at a meeting.
Right.
And we did talk about not all businesses are incorporated.
Right.
So I think it's just a simple enough, and I don't agree.
Yeah, I thought about that actually. I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it.
And I say that simply because let's just hypothesize and say that I'm a business owner in town, and rather than owning my real estate and being a taxpayer and a resident, I'm renting a space within the town. I am unincorporated, I'm a sole proprietor. I'm denied the ability to come and talk about the things within the town that are affecting my business within the town.
That certainly was not my intent. I'm glad you brought that up. That was certainly not my intent. I also don't think that it was certainly my intention to, if someone introduces himself as a business owner, to act to see a corporation, I'm not going to, tell them to produce.
I think that's why we need to specify business owners rather than, and it's within the town limits.
Right, yeah, I think that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay, I would make a statement for the record. I don't really see the need to make the changes that you have. And I don't see any need to exclude people that are of this community. This is a community. This is the center of a community. And I believe that everybody, we should be inclusive of all the people in the surrounding community, because they shop in the town. Some of them have more interest in the town than people that live in the town. So it just appears to me that this is just one more of the ordinances to try to limit my duties or something, and I just don't understand that. I mean, why I am so unwelcome in the town of Rising Sun. So that's my statement.
May I respond? As I say, this is something actually that I had been thinking about following the decision we really had to make regarding non-resident property owners. This was, I felt, really more geared toward acknowledging that if you own property in town and if you pay taxes in town, even though you can't vote, this still recognizes that you have a voice, that your voice is important. It really, really predates anything, you know. You're being sworn as mayor is something I've been thinking about since we made that vote.
Commissioner Nunn. The other thing that I would like to point out is the current language would not allow, like, for instance, somebody from the Greater Rising Chamber to come and speak, because the language, the way it's written right now, says taxpayers or residents of the town. It doesn't say anything about, I mean, I guess.
Right, and that's why I included, you know, recorded organizations. I mean, I was thinking of the chamber, the fire company. There are a lot of, you know, there are a lot of good organizations in town that I think need to be included in the conversation. So this